Hi, everybody.
Halo Mas.
Hello, Pat. It's nice to see you all and nice to hear from you all. I've haven't been too involved in music studies lately, so yeah, thanks very much for having me here. And I apologize in advance if I'm a little rusty with my presentation skills and my analytical descriptions of things. But I'll move right over to the presentation. Okay. All right, so I'm here to talk about another piece of Dewa Alit's. This is a piece called Caru Wara, and it was composed 2004, 2005-ish. It had some earlier incarnations. Actually, the initial version of the piece was a combination of gong kebyar instruments and also angklung instruments. But it was written for the 2005 gong kebyar competition for the anak-anak, for the children's groups. It was the tabu kreasi. Maybe a little bit of background about the gong kebyar competition. So every year, every summer in Bali, there's a kind of a 6-week-long arts festival, and there's these government-sponsored competitions for different types of ensembles. So gong kebyar, semar pagulingan, gender. Gong kebyar traditionally is probably one of the longest going and kind of one of the biggest kind of spectacles. But there's also a children's division for the gong kebyar competition. And what they do basically is each kabupaten, like each county, I guess, each county picks a group, and then that group rehearses, for months in advance of the competition, and they do it mabarung style, like Wayne was explaining. The two groups on the stage, they're alternating back and forth, playing pieces in the same genre, and so one of the genres that they'll have often is tabu kreasi, right? So instrumental creations. And that's what Charuwara was composed for. So it was composed to be the from the Gianyar Regency, the Gianyar's tabu kreasi for that year. But because there were some rules, I think, around the gong kebyar competition being gong kebyar only, he was not allowed. My understanding was that he was not allowed to use the angklung instruments, so he had to kind of compose it to use gong kebyar instruments exclusively. So the group which was representing Gianyar at the time is a group called Charuwara, and it's a group that is sponsored through the kind of the royal patronage of Ubud. And this was a group of musicians. The group started, I think, in 2001, the children's group. And they were, they started from a pretty small age. And the group was performing a weekly tourist show at the Lotus Cafe, which you can see here on your right side. And kind of what that meant is, from pretty early on, they were playing regularly and playing out a lot. And I think that's, by the time we got to 2005, when a lot of them were in their teens, maybe high school age, some younger, some maybe even a little bit older, they were already pretty seasoned folks. They were pretty skilled players, and but they were also young enough to have kind of really flexible brains to be able to handle some of the unusual things that Alit was going to throw at them with this piece. The first section that I want to talk about is actually the opening. The opening, like Gergel, is also pretty striking, and it's I also think kind of a statement in and of itself. And in order to get a sense for why it would be to have an opening like this would be a statement, I actually compiled like a cut of the openings of like 11 different tabu kreasi from like the late 90s to up until 2005, like 11 different tabu kreasi. So you could get a sense for like, at this arts festival, this big competition, it's kind of like a sporting event. People are cheering and hooting and hollering, and there's definitely an element of like, the tabu kreasi, there's like a lot of showing off, a lot of like even choreographed kind of showing off, what they call gaya. A lot of expectations to kind of wow the audience. And so I kind of assembled this supercut of different openings just so you can get in your ears kind of what audiences would have been kind of looking for at the time for the opening of the Tabu Kreasi at the Bali Arts Festival. Let me know if you're not able to hear anything. Is everyone's able to hear?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I think you get the idea. And please keep in mind, I'm not like knocking any of these pieces. It's just, actually I threw in a lot of pieces that I really like that are really awesome, played really well. But I'm just trying to kind of set the expectation, right? What the audience expectation would be in a kind of a festival setting. So let me play the opening. I'll just play the first minute or so of Charuwara by comparison. So that's the opening. It's great. It's like a full 2 minutes of just sitting in that quietness, this kind of meditative quietness. So I just brought out a few observations which I thought were kind of interesting about it. It's certainly at a slower tempo than the other examples we heard. This really sparse, kind of almost pointillist texture in the beginning. Actually, even listening to it now, with having just been listening to Gel, they strike me as being really similar openings, actually. And like like these descending, these single notes for different instruments, kind of cascading in a descending way. Really, there's a similarity there, but very different affect, right? Not really, not a lot of complicated interlocking going on, not like what we heard in those other examples. And you also get this sense of like continuous melodic development happening over a really long period of time. A lot of Tabu Kreasi, I won't say all, but like a lot of Tabu Kreasi, especially in the opening section, it's short phrases, short ideas. kind of being mixed and developed. It's kind of a different expectation for like phrase length, whereas this is like something happening over several minutes. Other kind of interesting thing is the you can't see because there's no video, but there's actually 4 drummers rather than 2, the kind of usual 2, and the 4 drums are all tuned differently. So you have a kebyar pair, wadon lanang, and then a krumpungan pair, wadon and lanang. So krumpungan is a smaller drum which is higher in pitch. So you actually get these 4 melodic pitches. So there's actually some kind of drum melodies. So things like that. So again, I think there's, my reading is a statement about a kind of a challenge to what festival goers were used to hearing for the opening of the kebyar competition, right? There's maybe, there's not a whole lot of room for like spontaneous applause breaks in that intro, which we heard for Charuwara. So I thought the sense I get is he's kind of asking us to lean in and listen and be quiet and pay attention rather than hooping and hollering and things like that. So right from the beginning, some pretty remarkable things about the piece. Next section I thought I'd talk about is, so immediately after this section we get kind of the first tune. I didn't want to call it kawitan or pangawak. I wasn't really sure how any of those structural names really applied in the case of this piece. And so I'm just calling this the first tune. It's a repeated gesture, it's a repeated like a 2-bar phrase in 9 with some really interesting melodic and rhythmic relationships happening between the different parts. So I'll play it right now. You'll hear it 3 times. First time you'll just hear the bottom 4 staves, so the bottom 2 rayong players and then the lower pitched melody instruments, and then you'll hear the higher rayong and then the higher melody instruments. There. So you can hear the penyacha probably the most clearly, those dotted quarters. So what did I want to say about it? Some things that are interesting about it, you hear that all the melodic parts are syncopated, even the bass voices. And they're all demonstrating a certain amount of rhythmic independence from each other. All the phrase groupings are kind of accenting different parts of the beat. They're also melodically independent in that most of them are starting on different notes. I think only 2 of the melodic parts are actually starting on the same note. All the other ones on the gong, lined up on the gong, are departing from different pitches, or arriving to different pitches, I guess, depending on how you feel your gongs. And they all have kind of contrasting contours. So yeah, it's very different from what you would think of as being the like kind of quote unquote normal heterophonic approach, right? The role of the melody instruments here is not to accent, not to provide like a melodic foundation or a melodic through line to the elaborating parts. There's not like a unison anchor happening at regular points as you would typically see in a lot of Balinese music. Each of the parts are melodically and rhythmically very different from one another. And they're actually, I think, coordinated to be different from each other to allow for other textures to pop up. So some of the observations, right? First that they're all starting on different notes. So we see, I don't have any clefs here, but you can that's a low dang, and then a dong, and then a dong. So that's like a scale degree 3, a scale degree 5 or 6, however you want to call it, a scale degree 2, and then a scale degree 5 again in the second to top one, and then a scale degree 6, 5, 6, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, so starting on different notes, and then proceeding from there also to be phrased differently. And the other thing about what's interesting about the pokak parts, so the three bottom staves, is that they're all pretty regular groupings, but they're off from each other. So you have like a 3/8 note grouping right in the penyacha part, which is the third from the bottom. You have 3/4 note groupings in the jublok part, which is the second from the bottom, and then this kind of 2+3+3 pattern in the jugogan. That kind of a pattern grouping. So they all have like a pretty repetitive, consistent kind of character to them, but they're all off from each other. So they all line up on the gong, and then from there they kind of phase in and out of alignment. And I think that kind of effect of that perceptual effect of things phasing in and out of alignment, that kind of kaleidoscopic effect, is something which you see in a lot of Dewa Alit's music. Even going back to like Wayne's example of the beat and the Panyuwud of Gerigel, where you're going right. You have the beat phasing in and out of alignment there. So I think you see that there's some of that is carrying over, and you see it in kind of in a larger orchestrational, I think, kind of a sense also. So the last thing maybe is the phrasing in the higher voices. Those are all accenting different parts of the measure. So you hear so what I did was I drew little boxes around how you might hear, when you hear the two parts played together, you hear them kind of interlocking with each other. And yeah, it sort of creates this kind of texture where it's kind of two different phrases, two different melodies, but then they're also, because they're accenting complementary parts of the beat, they kind of blur, they kind of blend together. So it's a cool effect. The other thing I want to call attention to is this melody in the pamade, which is the second one from the top, second one down from the top. No, no, no. I'm probably singing that on the wrong notes because it's very similar to the melody that we'll see come in the next section, which is here. So I'm calling this melody A. We can hear what it sounds like. So then, yeah. So again, you have that kebyar effect. It's doing 5.5 beats and then another 5.5 beats, or 11/8. And then, so he has two beats of this in the next section, followed by this rayong part that goes over the top. Which just kind of skates over. So he sets up this kind of, this syncopated melodic background, and then overlays a rayong solo on top, which just kind of skates, I feel like, right over the top of it. There's no, it's not moored really to the framework of the gongan, which has been established. Yeah, and again, this is just to reemphasize in the first tune. So that part in the pamade is really similar to what we get here. It's kind of a transposition, and it's a development. I really feel there's a relationship between those two. Yeah, so then keep that in mind. So keep that kind of continuity in mind as we're going from that kind of first tune into this next reongan, into this next Gigenderan part, which is so Gigenderan are like a staple in Tabu Kreasi Baru structure. Basically, it's a long solo for the gangsa section with a really intricate kotekan. Can sometimes borrow melodies and riffs and other things from Gindar Wayang music, but not always. Yeah, sometimes has a melodic ostinato to it. So following this reongan solo here, Alit moves into something similar, a big old Gigenderan, which I have more or less transcribed here, although you may not be able to read it because it's so small. But what he does is he keeps that same that 11/8 kind of kebyar pattern with the with this kind of repeating syncopated jugogan line, which isn't really connected at all to the melody, to the kotekan, and has this really long kind of architected kotekan over it, which has a really kind of interesting form and an interesting kind of symmetrical structure, I think. So yeah, I'll just play it so you can get a sense of it, and then yeah. That's the whole Gagenderan. I kind of broke it down into chunks that I feel, I feel like you can kind of take parts of it into groupings. And so I identified this motive in the beginning, which I'm calling 3+1, but it's more of it's more just kind of playing around with a rhythmic feel. And then moving into this 2-beat kind of stock pattern. Before starting this really long sequence of going all the way from the lowest note of the instrument all the way to the highest note of the instrument, and then working your way back down again. This really cool kind of pyramid thing that happens in the middle, and then goes back into another kind of what I call a stock pattern, like a 2-beat stock pattern you would see in a lot of different types of gamelan pieces, back to this kind of same 3+1 motive kind of feel. So there's like a bookending, right, of those two motives, and then these stock patterns on either side, and then in the middle you have that kind of pyramid structure. So really nice kind of symmetry there. I'll wait for it to play around and loop it around and see if you hear the same thing I do. This is that 3+1. Oh no, it stopped playing because I did that. Yeah, so whenever I tend to talk about this piece, for some reason I can only get through the first 5 minutes because I have so much to say in I only get through the first 5 minutes of the piece before I run out of time. So I'll just sum up a few things that I think are really interesting about this piece, and maybe things that you will see in subsequent lectures, like as Alit's style continues to develop. One is this idea of like subverting genre expectations, so kind of unconventional, kind of challenging, creating kind of challenging orchestrations and textures for listeners, to kind of ask them to hear things differently than they might otherwise expect to. Really interesting approaches to melodic stratification, right? So this kind of polyphony, the melody starting on different pitches, not really aligning in a standard heterophonic way, but also composing them in a way that's that's like fundamentally also polyrhythmic. So it's like polyphony, but it's also very purposefully polyrhythmic also. And then having these elaboration parts, both the Gagenderan, Kotekan and Triso, and the Reongan, very much not tied to what's happening melodically at all in the pokak, in the kind of those core melody instruments. Oh, that's my timer I put for me to stop. But then yeah, so having these elaborations which are kind of running according to their own logic with this background, again, kind of over these ostinato backgrounds. And then what I would say, like the courage or the kind of audacity to sit with and develop single motives, single motivic sequences and ideas. So you'll see a lot more of that in genetic, where he'll take much smaller melodic things and sit on them for much longer. Yeah, so, but you see, I see elements of that already happening in this piece also. Yeah, so I think that's about all I have to say. So thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Pete. That was great. Yeah, I would like to ask if anybody has any questions to please put your name in the chat box.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, who's that?
I have a question. It's Jody. I'm in the dark, but I'll fix that.
Go ahead, Jody. Yeah.
Okay. I'm interested in the notation that Alit uses himself to remember these pieces. When I was at Harvard with Gamelan Betty, I commissioned Alit to do a piece, and he was very excited because he never about the idea of mixing Slendro and Palog together. So he wrote this fantastic thing, and he had all these notes, which I never got a copy of. So I know he does make notation, and I'm wondering, for those of you who've seen that or worked with him, what does he write down? How does that work for him? What can we learn from it? Thanks.
I think he's tried a few different approaches to notating pieces that I'm aware of. One is like kind of traditional aksara, Balinese syllables on graph paper, which a lot of composers do. Another one is spreadsheets. I've gotten Excel documents, like thousands of rows long of pieces from him. So I've seen him notate in Excel also.
That's right. He did a piece for Galactica, and the score was pages and pages and pages of an Excel document with each cell counting for one beat. And then someone who was in the group, Ryan Meyer, translated that into notation that other people could use. So I guess that does work.
Yeah, and Michael has a comment. I think for a lot of his music now, he's making full-blown scores where all the parts are notated essentially. I guess that's.
But in what kind of notation?
Numbers.
So Oscar has he actually has
I have
score that he could
genetic here, which well, of course, I will show in more detail next week. But if you let me start my video, then I can just show a little snippet of it I've got in front of me now.
Yeah, let me enable that. Hold on just a second.
So this is a snippet from genetic. So this is using Bali Aksara, as Pete said, but yeah, on like graph paper. So it's very rhythmically precise. He's showing exactly where it, lines up in between beats of whatever variety he likes. Yeah, what's quite interesting about genetic is that it's in like part book form. So this is only the gangsa, polos, and sangsi parts, but he hasn't notated them together. He's notated them like this is polos on top, and then the bottom is sangsi. So each part is very sort of dislocated from each other in this score in particular. But I think as Michael might show next week, his more recent scores, everything you can see all the parts all together, and I think he's using numbers now, not Bali Aksara, because his tuning is weird now.
Thanks, Oscar. We have a question from Chris Hall.
Hello, everyone. Pete, my question is, to what extent, well, I don't know. I'm looking at the title of this piece, and I'm curious if or whether that's got any sort of sway with how you understand this piece and the statement it's making.
Charuwara.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So what I know of the original title was Charuwara Sangama, which is maybe a little bit more of a controversial title, I guess. First thing I guess that's interesting. Well, Charu, right, is like a forbidden offering, right? So the Charuwara, that's my kind of, I don't really know if that's the right way of translating it. Yeah, something along those lines. Like a prohibited, forbidden offering, something along. Is that more or less accurate? Somebody else can fix me if I'm wrong.
I don't know. The first thought I had was of Macharu, like the ceremony you might have,
right? Yeah.
Before like Nyepi or something like that.
Wara, I thought was like meant forbidden or prohibited, something along those lines. But yeah, maybe Putu can fix me. But I have an interesting anecdote about the title though. So the piece is the Charuwara. The group's name is also Chanitwaya. The adult group for that is also owned by the same organization is Chandra Wirabwana. Chuchuk Wana is another one of their taboo kreasi. So you're starting to notice a pattern, right? The group's owner is named Chotwa. His nickname is Chotwa. So it's not like expressly stated, but it's a little. I think it's some. When you compose for that group, you're kind of obligated, I think, to have the acronym BCW for your piece titles. Okay. It's like something that they do. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
I believe we have a few questions from Putu.
Cool. Sweet. Thanks, Bleep Pete. I'll let my father ask one first, and then I'll jump in.
Well, thank you again from Colorado. What is the name? Papit.
Yeah.
Let's start with the Charuwara. Charuwara in Balinese language, Charu is an offering, sacrifice. Waro is actually as a day. So like in Bali, we have like 1 day, 2 days, like 3 waro, 3 waro, chatu waro. So that's mean offering or the day offering. So that's probably if you translate to Balinese, to English from Balinese language. But if he gonna be adding Charuwara something, that's gonna be with different meaning. So that's number one. Number two, talking about the composition, the kreasi baru that start a long time ago with Pak Brato, the concept is a little bit different. When Pete mentioned about kawitan, pengawa, and pengecer, usually that it's not on the composition. So that's actually only for traditional piece. So for the new composition, mostly Pak Brato said is a jinaman. This term come from the Gener Wayang, jinaman, and after that Generan. So during the before the Generan, sometimes they put what we call tanya jawab. Tanya jawab is like QA. QA that means individual instrument, can be drum solo, reong solo, kantil solo, or melody solo. So and the last part usually they call gagambangan. Excuse me. After the QA, sometimes they put a generan or leluangan or angklungan. So, and the last part gonna be mostly they call the Gagambangan. So that's concept from either Pak Prato or Pak Cindy. And the new composition actually is from the beginning, Pak Prato already suggests that, you know, in the middle you can put anything. So the new composition here, Charuwara, so solo instrument and also QA, and also the beat is not always going to be equal beat. So that's actually is already Pak Prato already thinking about that, because some of the Pak Prato composition, Paschimo, Puro Paschimo, he's already using the 3-beat cycle there. So he start there. And my question is, you know, mostly for the new composition, sometimes we forget about the harmony. The harmony is very important in Balinese music. So of course we have a kempiung part, kempiung telu, or gembyang. So most of the time the new composition, I don't know, in somehow it's hard to find the harmony there, or they put it together. It's like Dewa Alit doing it. Sai, Baro, Sai Selisir, put it together. It's gonna be hard to look at the harmony. So I don't know. What do you think? So Pete, you focus on the composition. Thank you.
Yeah, those are really, yeah, thanks very much for those comments about Tabu Kayasi form and those things. That's good context to bring up. Yeah, I think my sense of Alit's music is that he's thinking about, he's not thinking about harmony kind of purposefully, in a sense that he is trying to maybe challenge like normal relationships between the kotekan and the melody, for example. Like I think he's looking to kind of separate those two, and he's maybe like, I think in the case of that Gagendaran, I feel there's like a real desire to think about maybe direction, maybe, you know, not so much pitch, not so much about having pitches aligned, but maybe just having a direction. So, you know, and then maybe creating an effect where some instruments are moving in one direction and other instruments are moving in a different direction. At least I get more of a sense of that certainly in his later music, and I'm thinking maybe this is like an early kind of that, because if when I look at the notes, right, like if I compare it to some other, to lots of pieces by people like Patwinda or other great but more traditional composers, you see things lining up melodically in a much more regular way between the kotekan, the reong, and the melody instruments. You see unisons and those things, exactly the harmony that you talk about. You see those things lining up much more evenly. You don't see that in this music as much, and I think that's on purpose.
I think my question is, basically, you pretty much answered it, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. But you briefly touched on the sort of descending and ascending lines that Pak Dewa Alit uses specifically in Charuwara. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on why it's so prevalent. Is it, to my ears, sometimes they're interesting melodic lines, but they function as sort of rhythmic commotion rather than melodic ones. I'm wondering, since you were talking about the heterophony and polyphony of melodic texture specifically, if that sort of reorients the way melody is heard.
Yeah, I tend not to hear a lot of the newer music and some of this earlier stuff too as being kind of melodically based. A lot of Balinese music is very much melodically oriented, I would say. It's tied to a melody, and the melody has a really central function there. This music, I feel like, is less based in melody, and again, more based in like these perceptual effects, like maybe that this sense of things coming in and out of alignment. So when something like descending and ascending melodies kind of happening at the same time, so your ear is hearing something go down while something else is going up. I feel like that's where the composition is happening, not so much in what exact notes are being used. the thing which is the composition is the attention is on maybe contour, or yeah, maybe contour more so than actual melody. Just a guess.
Butsu, did you have any more questions? Okay. Leon would like to make a comment on this topic here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So it's early morning here in Solo. Hello to everyone. I would mention that sorry, I saw that his name on the Putu, Bli Putu and Papa. What they mentioned about harmony, we need to understand that harmony in gamelan music, either it is Javanese, Balinese, or Sundanese, it tend to be more probably. Well, I mean, here in Solo, I could use like somehow obvious that is the sele. So that's the principle of harmony in music. Of course, Balinese has its own sai and other like melody pokok and stuff. So I would mention that we cannot see the harmony as how do diatonic musicians like classical musicians or jazz musicians understand it as going from dominant and stuff. So like in this case of the Dewa Alit compositions, like it brings more kind of changing the modes if we mention that way. Like if we're really borrowing this term of modes, but it uses like bringing from this side to this other side in this one composition, right? So that could be the harmonic playing, the harmonic play, the harmonic variation of it. So if we try to understand like, oh, wait, the game it came from major to minor, doing this kind of tonic modulations and stuff, we're never gonna get it because there is no chords in gamelan, like in the way we understand it of thirds, right? So, but harmony in gamelan is a very important thing. That since we don't get the thirds, we say, oh, it doesn't have harmony. No, it doesn't have the harmony we understand as major minor chords, but it has a harmony of sai or sele patet and even the laras, like when going from slendro to pelog and many other systems, right? So, well, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you for the time.
I have a question for either Pete or Wayne or whoever else would like to jump in. But my question, since I know probably less about specific Balinese composers and Balinese music in general than a lot of people here, my question is to Dewa's background a little bit. So has anybody sort of talked to Dewa about maybe what brought him to composing in sort of a unique and sort of a new way compared to his peers, and what is his background and interests in this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think people like Wayne and Michael are more than qualified also to speak on that. But I can say, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't know him when he was younger because he's older than me, but Michael did. So maybe Michael can talk more about what he was like when he was younger. And I think he I mean, he was pretty young when he composed To Get a Gal. And that was already a pretty radical statement, and so I think that's always been kind of part of. I think he was, I mean, he was kind of in with a kind of the music contemporary crowd in Bali in like the late 90s and early 2000s too, which is like it's kind of its own kind of scene attitude towards Balinese composition. Composers like Wayan Sadra and Gede Udana and people like that. But yeah, Michael, if you want to jump in.
Michael or Wayne, do you want to jump in on that one at all?
I'll just jump in to amplify what he said. A lot of it had to do with the, the amazing environment. So on the one hand, Alit was a academy trained musician. And at the time, there was a lot of, a great deal of rebellion going on. The students were really pushing back. And Alit was, I think, in maybe the early wave of that. I'd have to trace the years a little bit better to know, but there was definitely a lot of pushback, and wanting just to break out. They felt constrained by the conservatory conservatism. So that was one part. Another was that he was surrounded by incredible musicians in Sudamani and in Pengosekan in general that were able and willing and loved doing these crazy things. I mean, they were ready to enact his visions in such a beautiful way. They spending hours and hours doing something that they had no background in, like thinking in terms of counting to 15 or whatever it may be, just thinking in completely new ways. So he had simultaneously the push, the motivation, the kind of the youthful willingness to rebel, and the creative personal resources to do it.
I just want to add one thing to that. Can you hear me? Because I can't get on the video. Matt, can you?
Who is this? Who is it?
Michael.
Oh, Michael. I might have to ask you to unmute. Hold on just a second.
Oh. I mean, I don't have much to say because everybody said it, but I do have one thing to say.
There we go. You can maybe do your video now.
No, I mean, I just think all the things that Wayne just said and that Peter said are all really true, but there were lots of people around, but there's only one Alit. He really is unique. And so I just think he's an extraordinarily thoughtful person. By nature, he's extremely contemplative and serious, and he likes a good laugh, He can be, but he can also be very reclusive and very mysterious, and I just think that he has a kind of a transcendent personality that drives him to be an innovator.
Yeah, I'll share a story. I know he's going to look at this later, so he might be mad at me for telling this story, but I'll tell it anyhow. He told me once that he was thinking about a piece and he was riding his motorcycle, and he became so involved in his interior world with thinking about the piece that he crashed straight into the back of a parked truck. I mean, he literally plowed into the back of this truck, and I think he might have broken a bone. I'm not sure what happened. It was kind of serious, but I mean, I love that story in a way because it revealed to me just the degree to which he kind of inhabited and became absorbed in this interior world of thinking about music and tones and how they could go in new ways.
Thanks for the comments, guys. Does anybody else have any comments or questions that they would like to add to the conversation tonight? Cool. I don't think anybody else is coming forward, so maybe we'll call it an evening. Thank you to Wayne and Pete for your awesome presentations, and thank you everybody for your comments. And we'll be back on Sunday here. I'll make sure that the link is working on our website for Sunday. But we have Michael and Oscar who are going to be presenting 2 more of Dewa Alit's pieces on Sunday. And these lectures, if you'd like to donate, we do suggest a $10 donation per lecture if you are able to do so for the Artist to Artist Preservation Fund. And you can do that on Nusantara Arts website if you are financially able to do so at this time. And looking forward to another day of Bali music on Sunday. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. It was great.
Thank you, Matt. That was great. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, Pete. I learned a lot.
Thank you, Wayne. It was a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody all around the world. Solidarity in Gamelan.
Wow.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.